owning servant leadership as part of your own personal narrative. How's that? And then tips on how other people exercise servant leadership, personally and professionally. I'm going to give you the microphone.
I'd like to hear about how others have designed or built a culture of leadership in their organization or company.
I'd like specific points of how to talk about the tenets of servant leadership and address the issue that there is not a work person and a whole person, the whole person. How to introduce those concepts when they're often, still today, very taboo in a lot of organizations.
I think the challenge that I'm looking for today is to look at the different culture between the competitiveness, especially in trying to rise up in leadership, versus when you become a leader, being able to serve in the concept of servant leadership.
Anybody in the back? Yeah. Oh, sure.
I would say engaging teens and young adults in servant leadership and also diverse populations in servant leadership.
Who else?
Right here.
Oh, come back.
We're the Blanchard Foundation, so we're just really curious what already is happening here in Milwaukee.
Where else?
Here. Oh, right here.
Somebody here?
Okay, so
All right, very good.
I guess what it means to be a servant. I think a lot of people, when they think leadership, they think telling people what to do without trying to understand, what it is that is valuable to an employee. So I think, first for a leader, he must learn, know how to serve before he can become a leader. And I'm interested in, how to develop those skills and how to develop those characteristics as such. So.
Excellent. Any others at this table? We've got three tables back there. You all got anything you'd like to put up there?
We good? All right.
Great.
Thank you.
I was nervous. I didn't think it made sense.
If I could just give one practical thing, I'm going to put up here. EFHD. EFHD. Please repeat.
EFHD.
One more time. EFHD. If your expectations, E, for something, F, are not met, it leads to H, hostility and despair. If your expectations for something are not met, it leads to hostility and despair. If you came today wanting to talk about what it means to be a servant and that never was addressed, you'd say, well, this was a waste of my time. One of the things that we really believe is this: the agenda is always in the room. How many of you have gone to meetings where the agenda has been published 3 weeks in advance, you get there and there's nothing there that you want to talk about? And then you sit through the meeting, and then you walk on the parking lot or go to a tavern and have the rest of the meeting. The agenda is always in the room, and so that's why we believe it's very important always to listen to the people who have come. This is the tenet of servant leadership. How can we serve the needs of other people if we never ask them what their needs are? And so this is a very practical way in which to begin our meeting. With that, Dick is going to introduce our first speaker.
I'd like to introduce Alan, who is the VP of Personnel at the Brady Corporation. And he has been there for many years. He is well thought of in the community. I've never met him before, but you're going to meet him this morning. And Dr. Kelly, who is they're collaboratively working, and she's from MSOE.
We're here to talk about servant leadership, and the end of our story will definitely tie into servant leadership, but I think the thing that's really cool about this for us is it didn't start that way. It didn't start with a book where we said, okay, we've got to learn this and start practicing it. It started with who we were. And Sally, when you talked about bringing the whole person to life, what resonated with us and my team was the fact that it brought out who we were, and that was the common language that we ended up speaking. So just a brief note of introduction. Dick, thanks for the introduction there. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Kelly Otten. Kelly is a PhD, has a PhD in adult education. She is a professor here at MSOE, but more importantly for this case, she's my coach. Kelly and I met each other a long time ago when I was doing some professional development as part of my company, and Kelly was teaching us. And in her 1-hour course, I was so intrigued by the things that she was teaching that I thought it would help me build a stronger team. At that point in time, I was leading our Asia Pacific business. So I was the head of Asia for 14 years for Brady, and I was struggling. I just want to talk a little bit about the team that I asked Kelly for help with, and I'm not going to read the names or the nationalities, but it was interesting as I went over to Asia, and I'm obviously an American from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This was the leadership team that I inherited. These were people that you can see across 10 different cultures, and so when you talk about building a high-performance work team, think of your own instances of which you've had people from maybe South Milwaukee and Sheboygan and the different cultures that exist there, and then try to multiply that by 100 and looking at this team. So Kelly helped us go down a journey and learn more about this. And the wonderful thing about Kelly is I just don't like sitting in a classroom and learning it. It's nothing against MSOE or any other education institution like that. I like to practice it in real life. And so I said to Kelly, you've got to help me come and build this strong team, but I want to do it in a unique way. And these were the instructions that I gave Kelly as our consultant. We were growing very rapidly as a team at that point in time. And I can say that myself and my leadership team was growing so fast that it grew beyond where any of us were in our career. And so my first thing that I wanted to say to Kelly is help us to prepare for an environment where we've never been before. In our case professionally, that was sales growth and profit growth and a geographic expansion that we'd never experienced. I also wanted us to experience a culture that we had never experienced before. And if you remember the last page, that's pretty challenging because we had almost every culture covered except Vietnam. And as a practical note, we also recognized that Vietnam would be a potential area for expansion of us in the future. So not only would we get to learn about each other and building a team, but to learn about a new environment. And finally, in Asia, the culture is very much of respect for a leader and not challenging a leader. And so the final thing that we said is that I needed to be removed from the leadership role. I could participate as the team, but I could no longer be the leader figure as we went through this for a week. And finally, and this is really where servant leadership comes together, I said I don't want to do it in a classroom. When we leave Vietnam, somehow Vietnam has to be better as a result of my team being there. And so with that, I want to turn the microphone over to Kelly to talk about how she led my team, and then I'll come back at the end and tell you what the results were from my perspective.
And I'm actually going to turn this to him. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay, EJ?
It's an electrical problem.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So the team was set up. They weren't giving very much instructions at all. They were to go to Ho Chi Minh City. We were going to be working on a week-long project. And by the way, Al, who they followed and respected and really wanted him to be the leader all the time, he could not serve as the leader, which was a huge challenge for them. So that's what we gave them. They arrived them. Then we set them up with this project. So we worked with a local organization, a group of sisters from the Siena from Siena, and they had a multi-complex. It actually spread across Ho Chi Minh City and outside of Ho Chi Minh City. It included a health clinic, primary and secondary schools, a retirement home for abandoned senior citizens, specifically women, and a vocational school to teach women a trade, which was sewing. So this team entered, and we worked to learn about these individuals' needs. The logistics were the team was given $2,000. Okay, see if that works better. They were given $2,000 to do this project, which really wasn't that much. We started on Monday, and they needed to complete and have a project completed by Friday. Just like everything else in our world, it's compressed. We have to get things done rapidly. We need to understand the problem and have some action very rapidly. Their job was to engage with the customers. In this case, it was the students, it was the participants as far as the patients, the women, the older women as well as the younger women, the retirees, and try and figure out what were their needs and how could they meet them. Now that sounds really easy if you have a leader that's saying, okay, you go talk to this person, you go talk to this person, you go talk to this person. But remember, we wanted to have them learn to be a high-performing team with this multinational composition, and we wanted to make sure that Al was not necessarily on that pyramid that we oftentimes see, at the top of that pyramid, leading everything. So these are some dilemmas that we encountered. And these are really cross-cultural dilemmas that we see when we work with individuals. Again, it doesn't matter where we're working with them, but this happened to be across Asia. And the dilemmas were, how do we go from the specific to the diverse? Meaning, individuals from the United States are oftentimes very task-focused. Here's the task, get it done. Versus context-focused. What's the big picture? What do we need to look at? And in this case, it was, is our goal to paint? To improve the quality of the lives of, let's say, the senior citizens that lived in this very dingy living environment? Or was it to do something different? Was it to focus on the technical? What could we actually build? What could we give them financially? Or was it to look at, how can we improve their community? How can we improve their life in general? We also looked at this as far as dilemmas of short-term versus long-term. We kind of had some of the Westerners kind of had the mentality of, we're going to go in, we're going to do something, we're going to feel good about it, and then we're going to leave. But in other parts of the world, time is much longer, much, much longer than we have. And so how did that work? How did that also work as far as analyzing the situation, discussing, having those conversations, turning to each other, learning about each other? How do we also delegate authority, since Al could no longer necessarily wear the hat of the leader? And how do we look at this from individual parts? It's really easy to break this down into parts. How can we look at this as a whole? What does that mean? And how can we act in the best interest of society, not just our best interest, making us feel good at the end of the day? Now, put them in the situation to go analyze all this. At first it was individuals going around, analyzing it, not necessarily talking with each other, talking to a sister, talking to a retiree, but not necessarily talking to each other. They had to learn to serve the needs, but also to learn how they could do that as a group. And that was a big transition because they came from such different cultures. And we literally had situations where we would sit in the room and had structured discussion to learn from each other. We also had situations where we would line up. Okay, where are you on this? Where are you taking a stand? And we see some people over here and some people way over there. And then we had conversations about, well, wow, that really seems selfish. If you came here to paint and just fix those older women's homes, how selfish of you. Could you imagine being told that if you kept coming here to help and being told you're being selfish? That was a huge blow to some individuals. How could you say that? And so we had to understand, what do you mean by that? How do we understand each other? Which brought us, this is from a book, Servant Leadership Across the Cultures, from Trumpeter and Berman, sorry. And they look at this from, from a cross-cultural perspective. And really what it is how do you take those opposing values? What do you mean you're selfish? Because you want to complete a task, and you want to do it in the short term, and you want to really serve somebody and feel good about it. To how do we combine that? The other perspective was, if we hire somebody else, then we're contributing to the community, we're finding employment for others. That employment will serve others in the community, will serve others' family, as well as it will create some sustainability for the future. We hadn't thought, some of the Westerners hadn't thought about that. So how do we take that and combine it together? How do we take those opposing values and bring them naturally together? But it really required some of those tenets that we saw, for those of you here earlier, or for those of you familiar with it, Keith Kent and Larry Spears, listening to each other, self-awareness, empathy. We had to have that. We also went from that one-dimensional to the holistic, as well as just from pure analysis, which we're really good at as leaders, to synthesis. How do we bring this together? And also, how do we help others to rise to be those leaders and then spread that throughout the corporation?
So as we wrapped up our week together, Kelly skipped the middle part of the week, and she was almost physically pulling some of my team apart about Wednesday afternoon because we really struggled with finding this common language. She sat us down and literally pulled us off the project. She allowed us to, through these exercises that she talked about, find some common ground and some common language. And really what that started to boil around was servant leadership. And even though the one group wanted to paint and the other group wanted to employ someone to paint, we both wanted the same thing. It just took us a while to recognize and to see that. And that was that common language around servant leadership. So just real quickly with the project, how did it end up after a week? Well, we were able to do some really great things. For the retired ladies who were actually abandoned from their families, we were able to completely redo the living space that they were in. But we didn't do it with our own brushes. We did it by employing local people. And it was kind of funny because we ran out of time not being able to hit consensus, and then we wound up with that solution, which was an awesome solution to be able to employ people locally to make that project successful. Secondarily, we wanted to be able to do something that lasted beyond the 5 days that we were together with them. And so we recognized that by helping their vocational clinic and bringing in sewing machines actually to teach people how to sew, that would provide them a career for support for their families and beyond. So there were a number of neat things that we did physically in the space that were very meaningful to that community. But I would say even equally or more so meaningful was what we learned as a team. And it was this whole concept of